right, so first of all, talk about your win last night. It's been a late night for you.
Yeah, it was an amazing experience. We had a great event last night, lots of supporters. It felt great to be able to win this nomination, be the Republican nominee going into the election in November.
And I understand we said that wrong off the top, but we made sure we got it right the second time around when we were talking to you live during the show. But and we're just recording this for later. Any surprises for you as far as turnout?
I thought the Republican turnout was strong. I thought there was a lot of enthusiasm on the side of the Republican Party. You know, we had 9 candidates in our race, and I think that shows the amount of energy that's out there on the Republican side of the spectrum. And so we were pleased to be on top of that pile. There were a lot of great candidates, and so it was a great evening. I think a very positive outcome for the Republicans.
I thought it was interesting. We were talking about the difference between more than 65,000 Republicans turning out to vote yesterday to some 21,000 Democrats turning out to vote in this particular race. You were saying that you think that has a lot to do with the excitement and energy that you were just referencing.
Yeah, there's an enthusiasm gap out there. I think that Democrats and folks on the liberal side of the spectrum aren't very enthusiastic about the policies that are being promoted by their own leadership. And certainly the Republicans want something different. They want to change course in this country. And so they're ready to hit the polls. They're ready to have someone stand up for them. That's the campaign I'm running. I'm hoping to be that candidate who can carry their voice to Washington and let Washington know how frustrated people are out here with their government.
If I were to ask you your top 3 points that you really want to drive home and that you really care about the most, what would those 3 be?
Well, I think our government taxes us too much. I think they spend too much, and I think they borrow too much. And we've got to get the federal government under control. We've got to balance the federal budget. It's time to run government more like a business. Families and businesses out here have to balance their budgets. Why can't the federal government? And that's a question I think a lot of voters have, is why can't the politicians and bureaucrats in Washington change things? Why can't they get it fixed? And so I'm running because I think we need to balance our federal budget. I think it's time to rein in some of these programs and things that are expanding too rapidly. We can't afford them. Our debt now is $13 trillion. That's a huge, horrible legacy to leave to children and grandchildren. And so I'm concerned about spending. I'm concerned about the size of the federal government. And with all that, I'm mostly concerned about getting jobs created back here in the private sector.
Yeah, a lot of people are talking about jobs this time, and I think the hard part is, how do you create the jobs without funding it in some way? And how do you feel about unemployment extension?
Well, I don't think we should have a perpetual welfare system in this country where we encourage people not to work. So we need to get people back to work. And creating jobs or creating spending in the federal government doesn't put people back to work here in the heartland, here in Kansas. We need to get entrepreneurs working. We need to get the small business owner with the tools he or she needs to create jobs in the private sector. Now, the President and Speaker Pelosi have done a great job of creating jobs in the federal sector. It's time we get some leadership in Washington that focuses on getting the private sector churning again, and it doesn't happen from borrowing money from our grandchildren.
How do you create jobs in Kansas? One of the things I know that we've talked about is Missouri's lost several larger businesses of 100 people or more to the Kansas side because of tax incentives. What's your plan to create a job for the 91,000 people just in Kansas City that are right now looking for?
Well, I think we need to get the federal government out of the way. I talk to small business owners all over this district, and they tell me that there's too much uncertainty. There's too many changes happening in Washington with the huge health care bill that's going to come, that's going to affect every small business owner's bottom line, with cap and trade, which is a huge carbon tax bill that's being pushed by Washington, with card check, which is a huge pro-union bill that's trying to unionize all these businesses. All of that creates tremendous instability. Even the Consumer Finance Protection Act that recently passed, it creates a ton of new regulations. And so as the federal government tries to spend more, borrow more, regulate more, it all creates a huge federal burden that really is paid for by the business owners and the families here in the district. That makes it hard for them to create jobs. So my goal is to get the federal government out of the way.
Just trying to create jobs that way in the state level. Immigration, how do you feel?
Well, I think immigration, there's an immigration crisis in this country. We're not doing a good job of guarding our southern border. We've got to get serious about this. I think it ought to be one of the top priorities of the next Congress.